everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I guess it would have been Monday. I was able to put a bow on the Tuesday Aaron Torres pod. I wasn't able to record Sunday, wasn't able to get you the new episode on Monday, but I figured I'll go ahead and record post LSU Florida State. What could possibly happen in the Clemson Duke game? If anything interesting happens, we'll talk about it on Tuesday, and that is exactly what did happen. I thought Duke was actually pretty good. Mike Elko is a great coach. They won 9 games. Riley Leonard is a probably day 1 to 2 NFL draft pick, like a first, late first, early second rounder. I thought to myself, okay, Clemson, it's been a weird couple years. Something could happen, but Clemson's going to find a way to win. We'll talk about it on Wednesday's show. Well, what happens? Instead, not only does Clemson not win, but we get one of the wildest, most abominable, awful, ugly performances that I think any of us have ever seen. As Duke, they deserve all the credit. They deserve all the praise. They beat Clemson at home 28-7. And while I don't want to take anything away from Duke, the story is, I say it all the time, the more interesting story is often in the losing locker room. That is absolutely the case here. And that is because Clemson, I think it's fair to discuss, is this team done as a college football power as we know it? Because I think the answer might be. We'll get into that momentarily, but if you watch the game, it was wild because on the one hand, this was supposed to be the great coming out party for the new Clemson offense, okay? We all know the Clemson narrative over the last couple of years, really since Trevor Lawrence left, the offense just hasn't clicked. And it's been blamed on a few different people, certainly DJ Uiagalelei, who is now at Oregon State, actually was awesome on Sunday in a win over San Jose State, but then also on the previous offensive coordinator, Brandon Streeter. So you go out, you get the buzziest offensive coordinator you possibly could, Garrett Riley from TCU. This was a guy that everybody coveted, everybody wanted to bring in. Clemson was the one that got him. Clemson historically not a program that shakes up its coaching staff very often, but they go get this guy. He ends up coming in, and you pair him with former 5-star Cade Klubnik, who, to his credit, did look good in the ACC championship game last year, although it didn't look that great in the Orange Bowl, but that's neither here nor there. Cade Klubnik looks good, 5-star, elite offensive coordinator. It's going to be fireworks all over the field. Well, those fireworks sputtered out really fast because, again, as I said, this was one of the ugliest performances I think I've ever seen, okay? In total, Clemson turned the ball over 3 times and had 2 field goals blocked, and they really kind of came at the worst times possible. First quarter, you're down, you're looking for momentum, field goal blocked. Then in the third quarter, you're trailing. You need some momentum. You're starting to move the ball. Things are starting to go well. And every time Clemson got close, it's like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. The second you get towards that end zone, bad stuff happened. There was another blocked field goal in the third quarter. There was a fumble on the Duke 8-yard line in the red zone. And then finally the killer, early fourth quarter, Clemson fumbles on the Duke 1-yard line. On the literal 1-yard line, they fumble. And that's when you know it is just not Clemson's night. And so I think in the smaller picture, you can just sit there and say, look, bad night for Clemson, didn't work out well, wasn't their night. They'll bounce back. They'll be fine. But to me, I think it's a much, much, much bigger issue. Because remember, this is a Clemson team that 2 years in a row has not made the college football playoff. 2 years in a row has had to settle for only 10 wins. And I understand it's a different world. Clemson, 10 wins for most schools would be unbelievable. That's not the standard at Clemson. The standard is win ACC championships, make the college football playoff, compete for national championships. They haven't done it for 2 years. And I'll say, even with the staff shakeup, I know it's only one game. I don't think they're any closer. And when I look at this, and when I talk about Clemson being done as a college football power, this is what I'm talking about. Because if you watch this game, something jarring stood out to me. I didn't think that athletically there was much difference between Duke and Clemson. And to be clear, Duke is not one of these schools. Respect to Colorado, respect to Auburn, respect to LSU last year. Duke isn't one of these schools that could just go out and add 60 guys in the portal or 40 guys in the portal or whatever. This is about development, coaching, etc. from Mike Elko. But this is also Clemson's roster. It didn't look like the vintage Clemson teams of 4, 5, 6 years ago. You could sit there and say, well, Clemson outgained Duke. They did. But at the same time, it wasn't just the fun. Watch the game. First of all, the offensive line, I know the rushing stats were impressive, but Duke also had 6 tackles for loss, a bunch of sacks. And while there were certainly opportunities to run the ball, I thought the offensive line just looked just okay. Beyond that, the wide receivers, I know the stats say that Cade Klubnik threw for over 200 yards. Cade Klubnik averaged less than 5 yards per completion. That ain't the scheme. That ain't Garrett Riley. That's the fact that I saw a bunch of guys at Clemson that can't get open. This is a school that was once wide receiver U about 6, 7 years ago. This is the school that produced T. Higgins, Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, a first-round pick. They don't have guys that can separate. They don't have guys that can just go make plays. Watch college football. Colorado has 5 or 6 of those guys on their offense right now. You throw them the ball, they make one guy miss it 60 yards to the house. Certainly, Alabama has those guys. Florida State has those guys. Whoever. LSU has a bunch of them. They didn't win, but they got a bunch of them. You go on down USC, you go on and on down the list. Clemson doesn't have any of those guys. And then even on defense, where they've been pretty good, they gave up almost 7 yards per carry on Monday night. And so you can sit there and say, oh, it's one game, it's a bunch of fumbles, it's this, it's that. No. Defense didn't look good. Skill positions didn't look good. Offensive line didn't look good. And so to me, what this comes back down to, there's only so many years you can say, oh, it's the quarterback. Oh, it's the offensive line. At some point, a program just is regressing. We can pretend that that's not the case, but that is the case, in my opinion, right now with Clemson. You look at Clemson, doesn't look the same. And it comes back to a lot of what we've talked about in the offseason and a lot of what we've talked about over the last year or two. I think that Dabo Swinney's stubbornness has not only hurt this program, I think it's starting to catch up with him. And if you listen to this show or if you follow college football, you're probably pretty familiar with what I'm talking about. But Dabo has been a guy that has been a very vocal anti-transfer portal guy. We've talked about it on this show quite a bit. And he's basically, his stance has been, when we offer a guy, we're making a commitment to him. He's making a commitment to us. When he commits, we're not just going to recruit over him the second things go bad. We've made a commitment to him. He's made a commitment to us. We're going to work together to get the most out of that kid. And I think in many ways, that's a very noble stance to have. I would love for my son to play that. I would love to know that if my son has a bad week or a bad month or a bad year or, struggles with an injury, that the coaching staff isn't going to kick him to the curb. But at the same time, even if you're being loyal to the guys in your program, eventually it's a numbers game. I believe the stat is, I could be wrong on this, Clemson in this transfer portal era, they've essentially taken one transfer. It was a quarterback who transferred out of Clemson and then transferred back in a year ago. And so, again, it's noble. I respect Dabo Swinney and what his intentions are. But you're not going to ever go 25 for 25 in a high school recruiting class and develop all of them and they'll all work out well. Injuries happen. Medical retirements happen. You miss on some evaluations and some guys transfer. And so when that happens, you have to be able to backfill, and it works. By the way, not everybody has to be Colorado. Again, I've defended Colorado all summer because Colorado had to do it because the roster was terrible. But not everybody has to be Colorado. But Georgia added 2 wide receivers because they felt like the room was lacking. There was a lack of depth. They needed more bodies. Alabama had added a couple DBs after they lost DBs in the transfer portal. I don't think Nick Saban wanted to go in the portal, but when you lose 2-3 guys, he's going to fill those scholarships. And so that's what Alabama did. And so I think, Dabo, fair or not, like there's just this misconception that, oh my God, well, I mean, he has to, like he's being loyal to his guys. I get it. But some of his guys aren't being loyal back. And so it's almost like, and this is going to sound extreme, but it's like an eye for an eye. I'm not saying if Aaron Torres or John Smith, the wide receiver, just has a bad year that you got to kick him out of the program. But if Aaron Torres has a bad year and John Smith leaves the program, then you should probably go to the portal to try to find a body to replace him. It's just the new world of college football. And what I come back to is, if you're not doing this, you're putting your program into disservice. Okay, I'll use a cross-sport comparison. I'm going to talk John Calipari, Kentucky basketball here in a few minutes with their 5-star recruit and the issues that they're having. But why I bring it up, John Calipari about 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, was very vocal being anti-transfer portal. He said it's killing the small schools. I've had friends who's lost jobs because their best players leave at the last minute. And he was very anti-transfer portal. And then he started getting his butt kicked by older, more experienced players. And about 3 off seasons ago, when Oscar Tshiebwe was available and Kellen Grady was available and whoever, he started taking more of them. And he said publicly, he said, I don't like this, but my job is not to do what's right and perfect. My job is to do what's best for the University of Kentucky basketball team. Tom Izzo, same way, very anti-transfer portal. No, their best player is last year and this coming year, Tyson Walker, a transfer. And so from Dabo Swinney's perspective, it's noble, it's whatever. But you're hurting your program, you're hurting your team. And I'll be honest, I think Duke might be better than we realize. But I also think that you see that performance from Clemson. I mean, how can you feel good about that schedule going forward? One, just look at, first of all, they got Florida State coming to town here in a few weeks, like literally 3 weeks, 3 Saturdays from now, Florida State will be there. Did you watch Florida State, who, oh, by the way, has been very aggressive in the portal? Keon Coleman, 3 touchdowns from the portal. Johnny Wilson, wide receiver from the portal. Jared Verse, maybe the best edge rusher in college football from the portal. Now they've developed guys too, but Mike Norvell was like, I don't have 5 years to rebuild this thing. I got to get some guys out of the transfer portal. So they still have Florida State. They still have Notre Dame at home. By the way, transfer quarterback Sam Hartman. They still have Miami later on in the year. Miami, a bunch of transfers, should be much improved. You go on and on and on down the list. Clemson's schedule is not easy this year if you look at it. I should mention, by the way, they have North Carolina second to last week of the season. They have NC State. They have South Carolina. Look at those games. Tell me where the guaranteed wins are. Florida State at home, Notre Dame at home, North Carolina at home, South Carolina on the road, Miami on the road. They're going to rip through the rest of that schedule and make the college football playoff the way they looked last night? I don't think so. And so look, maybe I am wrong. Maybe this does happen. Maybe it turns out differently than I expect. But I think what we saw from Clemson, look, they're not going to be worse from a turnover special teams perspective. But I just didn't see enough talent. I didn't see the talent that's I didn't see the talent that's going to beat Florida State at all. I didn't see the talent that's going to beat Notre Dame. I didn't even see the talent. Like North Carolina looked better in their opener than Clemson did this weekend. Miami looked better in their opener. I watched the NC State opener at UConn. Brennan Armstrong's were really good. So I could go on, but I'll just wrap by saying, listen, what's the old saying? Rome wasn't built in a day, and it didn't fall in a day either. And it's the same with college football, college basketball. You don't always realize that you're on a backslide until it's too late. And I know Clemson has changed their, offensive coordinator. We all like Cade Klubnik coming out of high school, but they do not look like the same team to me. And I'd be worried if I was a Clemson fan about the future of this program.